thank you so much for joining me, for coming on. I really appreciate it. You know, Personally, I started making TikToks because of I kept seeing people post about, why didn't R2 just tell Luke that Vader was his father? That was my very first thing, and then I started seeing your videos, and that's really what inspired me to keep going. And it's just a lot of fun. I enjoy doing it a lot. But yeah, why don't we start by introducing yourself and how you got into Star Wars.
I'm Pep, or as I'm known on TikTok, at Element7. How I got into Star Wars is it's a pretty boring story because I got into Star Wars how everyone else got into Star Wars. My older brother introduced me. He showed me A New Hope when I was a kid, and ever since then I've been attached to it, and I've watched every single movie as they've come out. And when EU started happening and comics started releasing, I was reading those comics.
Okay.
And I've just been a huge fan ever since.
Hey, I mean, there's there's no wrong way. That's how you do it. That's how you do it.
It takes one person to show you.
Yeah, me, it was my mom was always like a closet nerd. So watching Empire Strikes Back on an old VHS tape, like the original with the woman with the chimp mask on, um, for the Emperor, like that. I grew up with that, and then
That scene.
yeah. But it's a lot of cool. But I wanted to bring you on because I've been meaning to do like a TikTok on what exactly balance in the Force means. And first of all, there's no way to do that in 1 minute.
I've made so many videos answering so many questions, and there's always some details that fall through the cracks, and then you see the comments on your videos and you're like, that's a good point, I should have touched on it.
Mm-hmm.
But that would have taken at least 5 more seconds that I didn't have.
Yeah, exactly. That's why my videos cut in so much, because I have to like get in there, say the thing, and then get out. Yeah. So one of the biggest misconceptions I always see is that it is the number of Jedi and Sith. Of like, okay, well, we killed all the Jedi, then we killed all the Sith. Mm-hmm. So there's balance. What do you think of that?
No, I mean that's the same thing with me. Every single person that I talk to about balance in the Force, it's always like the number of Jedi or Sith, or just the number of people on good or evil. And it's so that's like the number one thing that has been ever since the dawn of Star Wars.
Yeah, and it's not, it's a oversimplification, or is like I love how Luke puts it in Last Jedi, is to think that the Force belongs to the Jedi is vanity. Mm-hmm. Right? It's much bigger than just the two of them. So, and I do remember one of my early conversations with you. I feel like I don't think you and I exactly agree on what balance in the Force is, which is one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about it as well. Because to my knowledge, I don't think there's one single solid canon answer, but we are able to glean things from all the bits and pieces that we have. So, yeah, we'll jump right into it. How do you feel? What is the balance?
Well, I mean, you're right about one thing. There's not a single canonical answer to this, and it's always left to interpretation, as much as the Force is this mysterious, energy that surrounds us, right? And so it's always, from one person to the next, a unique interpretation of what this thing is. Balance to me is like the ebb and flow of the Force, and whether or not you are exerting yourself on it. So Jedi of old, have always been about the harmony of the Force and listening to its will and just letting it flow and being peacekeepers. And when we see the fall of the Jedi Order in the prequels, we're seeing them taking a much more militaristic approach. We see them connected so much more to the Galactic Senate. And it's that connection to that political power that is essentially causing them, however indirect it may have been, to exert their will onto the flow of the Force. And the same goes with the Sith.
They're more intentional with it. But
absolutely, yeah. They take the Force and they bend it to their will, and they try to use it as a tool. And whether the Jedi are using it indirectly to, influence the workings of the galaxy, the Sith are doing it directly by bending it and by taking it and using it for selfish purposes. And when we talk about balance, oftentimes, people will cite like a scale, right? And they'll see like there's a power of light and a power of dark, on one side or the other. But I think it's more than that, because obviously you need one to have the other. You can't have a scale with all light and no dark. And I think light and dark is always going to be there no matter what. And it's like, it brings me back to the Clone Wars episode on Mortis, where the father wants Anakin to take over to keep balance between the daughter and the son. And he doesn't exactly want him to destroy the son or destroy the dark side. He just wants to manage them. And so to me, like, in a nutshell, as much of a lengthy tangent that was, it's not about the number of Jedi, it's not about the number of Sith, it's just about who's exerting their will onto the Force as opposed to listening to it.
Yeah. So, spoiler alert, looks like we are in complete agreement. And I actually, man, I need to rewatch the Mortis arc, because it really was amazing. And how, you see when one passes, it's all death and decay, and then the daughter passes by, it's all life and rebirth.
That was another thing from The Last Jedi too that we saw. When, when Rey is describing exactly what she saw life, she saw like brightness, and then the darkness was death and decay, and the recycle back into the light. And that's why I love The Last Jedi so much.
Yeah, that short explanation was one of the best things we've like ever gotten. So I mean, my thoughts on it are going to be pretty similar. At first, I used to be on the camp that all you needed was the light side, and that the light side doesn't actually imbalance the Force. But that's not necessarily how it is. That's wrong. But basically, one of the things that was really telling for me is in the book, The Legends of Luke Skywalker, which overwhelmingly I don't like that book. But there was
I mean, I didn't have a chance to read it. I read what it was about, and like I guess what turned me off from like reading it fully was that it was all just kind of like third-hand stories about Luke.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It's a mostly third-hand stories about Luke. Some of them are terrible, but the story is told within the context of another story, and there's a girl that's like escaping where she was from, in order to find Luke and kind of join the rebels and stuff, so to speak. But it was very interesting because her culture is also Force sensitive, but they refer to it as the tide. And just the way that you mentioned the ebb and flow, they have almost their own code, and it says, for every ebb there's a flow, for every flow there's an ebb. The full moon must wane just as the new moon must wax. Happiness turns to sorrow. Sorrow is reborn as hope. Nothing is constant but change in the tide, and I am change. which I thought was really cool. They kind of refer to it as this that the light is like sunlit foam, and the dark side is like the shadowed eddies in the same tide. Basically, both are needed, but during that adventure, uh, he gets chastised a bunch because they're like, I've never met anyone this sensitive to it, but why can't you leave it alone? Why can't you trust in the tide that it's going to do what is needed without you trying to bend it?
Mm-hmm.
And that goes along perfectly with what you're saying.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of something that's actually new in canon, which is Zepho from Jedi Fallen Order. I think they have a similar explanation. I don't know if they call it tide, but it's like it's the same name, like in idea. But it's every culture basically has their own version of the Force, which is basically the same thing, which is everyone needs to learn. The flow needs to just go.
Yeah, just let it happen, Yeah. And it's we see the Jedi are trying to they believe in peace, but they kind of get I don't know, focus on the transitive property. So in order to keep the peace, they're like, well, the Republic keeps the peace. So if we support the Republic, that will equal peace. That's not necessarily true, and that's where things get out of whack. That's when they start, trying to bend things to their own will. But we see how Yoda learned from his lesson. I truly believe that the reason Yoda was chilling on Dagobah, instead of trying to actively seek down Luke and force him to train, is because he believed in the Force. He relaxed. He understood that the Force is going to bring Luke to me when he needs to be here, and I'm going to make sure that I'm ready for it when that happens. That's one of the things I appreciated.
And I appreciated that look into his life in Age of Rebellion. And it's just like, you see Yoda just kind of accepting the will of the Force and just living day to day, but he's still haunted by his failures.
Yeah.
But it turns from sad to glad because,
that book hits you in the feels, though.
It works out, right? Because you said that he was expecting the Force to just flow and give him Luke Skywalker whenever he was ready. And at the end of that panel, he arrived. He was like, the day has come.
Yeah, I've been working on my weird old man voice for a long time. Yeah. You think he planned all of that ahead of time, like him acting all crazy, or was that just like an impromptu Luke landed? He's like, you know what? I would be hella weird right now.
Well, I'm biased in that interpretation because, I was around when StarWars.com posted that post where it was a picture of Yoda, Luke, and R2. And the post said, good old Yoda and R2 putting on a show for Luke's sake. And I'm like, okay, so I guess they were putting on a show. He was being the senile old man, and R2 was just like, get away from me, you scare me. And I guess that was supposed to help Luke in some kind of way. But yeah, I'm of that. I guess that's the perspective I have on that particular. Why doesn't Yoda recognize R2?
Yeah, and also it's cool how that scene. I mean, it becomes clear why he does it when that blends into Ben talking to him at the same time. Because Luke just loses his cool instantly. Like he just crashed in the swamp. He's being offered shelter, like a warm meal, and he like throws the cup down and he's like, where the hell is Yoda? He's like, this kid's impatient. I can't teach him.
That's true. Like, I think the putting on the show and the act for Luke also kind of puts his preconceived notions at bay, because at the very end of that encounter, he's like, I'm looking for a wise old Jedi master, a warrior, and Yoda's like, oh, you're looking for Yoda. It's like, yeah, do you know him? He's like, that's me. Or that reminds me of Obi-Wan.
Of course I know him. He's me.
Yeah, that's classic Obi-Wan, right? He was like, oh, of course I know. He's me. But like, yeah, I guess he had this kind of like 7 foot tall warrior, notion of Yoda, and then he had this like meeting with a senile old man who's fighting with R2. I thought it was hilarious how that played out.
Which is also a lot like once Rey landed on Octo and was holding out the lightsaber, basically saying, "Hey, we need a great warrior. We need you to come join this fight." And in my head, I could hear "Wars do not make one great," as he
Yeah.
tosses the lightsaber aside. And I love the interplay of that moment. But getting back to the balance, what do you think this means for Gray Jedi? Are you into
Mm.
it? Are you out of it? What's your thoughts on them?
Uh,
You can ask
I
this question every day, so I gotta I gotta throw it at you.
I'm not for Gray Jedi because that muddles things. You're either you can okay. Let me rephrase that. I'm for Bendu. I
Yeah.
actually am a big fan of how they have it in the new canon, because in Legends it muddled things entirely in terms of like your loyalty and your what you stood for. If you were a Jedi, a Gray Jedi, and a Dark Jedi, it was like make up your mind. Like you're gonna use the dark side, you're gonna use the light side. Ahsoka is a perfect example of this. She doesn't have to be a Jedi. But she's clearly using the light side, and she favors the light side. So, Gray Jedi to me was more of a fan fiction concept. Like,
It's cool in video games.
yeah, absolutely. But spiritually, the concept of spiritually having like the Ashla and the Bogan and Bendu it like represent each side, just as an idea, is infinitely more profound to me than just having a Jedi who just can't decide whether or not he's light or dark. And that's actually an interesting point of contention that I'm hopefully going to address in the book that I'm writing,
Okay.
which is going to have Ashla and Bogan, but
Oh, I
story for
like
another
it.
day.
I'm excited. I'm excited for that. Um, all right, and I mean, yeah, I kind of feel the same way. Again, Gray Jedi, it's cool in video games, right? Because you get all the powers you want, but in practice, it's someone that doesn't stand for anything, and we know the dark
Yeah.
side corrupts. And so if someone's out there just doing, the Jedi's goal is to be with the will of the Force. Now that's exactly what Ahsoka's doing without being a Jedi, right? You don't need to be a Jedi in order to do that,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what you should serve. Or you can serve yourself or someone else. There's no middle ground. You can't be looking outward and looking inward at the same time.
Yeah.
And you know if you just want to go off and play by your own rules, well, then your own rules are subject to your own bias. So you may think you're the good guy just because of your, I don't know, political stance or whatever. Like you can't do it just based off of yourself. It has to be based off of what's good for everyone, and that's how you get to the light side. So that's kind of why I dislike it myself. It's kind of like being a gray vegetarian, where I'm a vegetarian but I eat meat. And you're like, then you're not a like.
You're no longer a Jedi at that point, right? You're kind
Yeah.
of just gray at that point.
But I loved how the book that you turned me on to, because I didn't know it existed, Secrets of the Jedi. I've been having a blast. I mean, I know this book is a little young, but it talks about the children that the Jedi bring, and how the children are the truest form of purity in the Force, because they touch the Force freely, without hesitation, without reservation, and without any particular alignment. They just are, and how that is balance. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, that's the truth of life, It's the same in real life
My
with
mind was just
children.
blown.
I
Sorry,
mean,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, if you think about life, just real life, it's practically the same thing, right? Babies and children, they are the most innocent forms of ourselves. Hear no evil, see no evil. They're not born with prejudices. They're not born hating a certain group of people. They have to be taught that. And so when they come out the womb and when they, start learning how to speak for the first time, they're just being very innocent. They don't have any ideas of who they should like, who they should hate. They just see the world, right? And so in this case, when the children are touched by the Force or are sensitive to the Force, all they feel is the ebb and flow that we've been talking about, right? And they have no concept. They have no notion of the light side or the dark side. But one could argue that instinctually they can feel like this tinge, right? If they ever touch the dark side, and makes them feel the oogly booglies, and that'll make them avoid it or something. But essentially, yeah, that is the purest form of being at one with the Force without dying, because like you're just in the presence of the Force, and that's it.
Man, sorry, I just like, it's a thought that I just never connected. I was just the concept I read, and yeah, that's actually beautiful because humans aren't born with any. There's really no negative. The only negatives are just when you're hungry or have to poop, really.
Yeah.
All right. So, what do you think about specifically the light side and the dark side? Do you have any thoughts or revelations on those? Do they both exist on a single continuum? Are there two separate things that are working in tandem? And how do they play in with both of the living and the cosmic force? Sorry if I threw a lot at you just now.
I think the light side and the dark side, they can be separated in a cycle, but because it's a cycle, at different points in time they'll be working in tandem with each other. And so the simplest concepts of light and dark is life and death. And so we'll have life and we'll have all of this happiness in the world. And then, some people will die, some people will meet their end, and their body will recycle into the living force. And then that energy breeds new life.
Simba.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think it's just a never ending cycle that you just need to let go. And, with different deaths and different life all across the galaxy, it's going to eventually line up where they're working in tandem with each other, but you need one with that, to have the other. And without the other, one is just emptiness, I guess, is the best way to describe it. You can't have, like, it's the same thing with science and the conservation of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Because you cannot destroy energy and you cannot create it. It comes from something. So new life cannot exist or cannot be created without another life feeding energy or feeding the force for that new life to arise. And so two things.
Yeah, and it's also kind of like
Cycle
how the concept of death also is what partially makes life worth living. It's but sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Keep going.
Oh no. I was practically done, but yeah, cycle and then in tandem. And what you say just now brings me to one of my favorite quotes from Troy, which was when Achilles says, "We are doomed. That's what makes life beautiful."
Mm-hmm.
And so if you had eternal life, you'd just be sitting there living day to day, like just in the minutia of life without any purpose.
Yeah, and and then the ultimate expression of, I guess, the provision of that in the Force is what Anakin did. He saw Padme was going to die, and rather than let that happen, and I'm not saying that he shouldn't have feelings, he shouldn't love or anything like that, but what I am saying is that he shouldn't kill hundreds of people to try and save one person who, frankly, would be appalled if she knew that that's what he was doing.
Yeah, it's very
We
backwards.
we all know Padme would give her life for her unborn children, absolutely, without a question. So it's,
She did.
yeah, she did, with no help from with some help from Anakin, just not the help that was intended. um, but yeah, well, what do you think about that in general? How Anakin, um,
Uh,
chosen one, bringing balance. We gotta jump into that.
um, well, a part of me thinks that he did bring balance by ending the Jedi Order. But and what I mean by that is not that he eliminated the number of Jedi that were existing and brought it back to the Sith. He brought balance by eliminating the Order in a way that they were exerting their will over the will of the Force by being connected militarily and by being connected to the Galactic Senate. And after that, the Empire proliferated and the galaxy was in disarray again. And the Force, I suppose, chose another chosen one in Luke and Leia. And this is where we get the quote from the movies, "There's another," right? And also from Rebels, Obi-Wan says to Maul, he is the chosen one, right? And so a lot of people get mixed up or get too caught up in chosen one, particularly the operative word of one, and think there can only be one. Like, this isn't Highlander. Okay, there's multiple chosen ones, right? And so Anakin was the chosen one to bring balance to the Force by eliminating the Jedi Order and by eliminating the Sith Order, which was Sidious and Darth Vader himself. And then Luke was the chosen one. By being the arbiter in which that happened, it brought Anakin back to the light side and therefore destroyed Darth Vader. And of course, we have Rey and Ben, who are the dyads of the Sith prophecy, who are the chosen ones in their own right to, end the Sith Order as they had rose from the Final Order on Exegol. So, I mean, it all works out if you think about it. But there's a lot of people who just really confuse and think that just Palpatine himself surviving is what erases his sacrifice. But
I used to be one of those people. I'm not gonna lie. I walked out of the theater mad because I thought, this negates everything that Anakin did. That means that he's not the chosen one. And I had my pitchfork, and
no,
and
I
then,
mean, it's a totally normal response to have. I was a little bit slanted when I first read the Dead Speak, right, in the title crawl, even though I knew Palpatine had to have been the Phantom Menace for the whole saga, and I wasn't about to accept that 1 through 6 was Palpatine, and then 7 through 9 was just some whole new baddie. Like, it was Thanos from the very beginning. He was pulling the strings. The moment I came to peace with Sidious being back was that it was, first of all, he had been destroyed. He just transferred his consciousness to another body, and essentially the whole chosen one prophecy was fulfilled, because at the end of the day, he destroyed the Sith Order from that time. And if he hadn't, Luke would have died, Leia would have been left with just scraps of the rebellion, and
they wouldn't have been able to do anything. Yeah.
exactly, and we wouldn't have had the dyad,
Yeah.
the dyad prophecy.
And that's where I ended up coming down on it. Is I recognize, like, no, the prophecy was fulfilled. Peace was brought back to it. Like, Palpatine all but ruled the entire galaxy. Like, really, it wasn't close, and they wiped all of that away.
Yep.
Now, that doesn't mean that there's never going to be another threat.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, absolutely brought peace back, destroyed all that infrastructure, and then additionally, after I started looking back into, because I love a lot of the legend stuff. I looked back into, I believe it was Fate of the Jedi, where Luke is, not Fate of the Jedi, the one series before that where he actually defeats Darth Kaitis, or where Darth Kaitis gets defeated, where Luke is actually feeling a lot of guilt because of the time period that he spent in the dark side, right? And then that like triggered me, like, oh yeah, I forgot. Palpatine came back in the he came back on both sides in the exact same way. The only difference is, instead of Luke going to be alone for a bit, Luke fell to the dark side completely. So
yeah, a lot of people pick and choose. It's frustrating. Like I just feel like people like to crap on the sequels just because it's the in thing to do now.
it's
Because
low hanging fruit for sure.
yeah, and the same thing happened with the prequels. They have their retribution now, and they've turned their backs on the Star Wars community, and they're hating the new kid on the block now. But it's interesting you bring up like Darth Caedus and Darth Crate, or you didn't bring up Darth Crate, but you're bringing up Caedus brought up Crate in my mind, and it's totally true what you said. It doesn't mean that like the Sith would never return. On the contrary, a lot of people forget legends where a whole like the Sith
Secret tribe, yeah.
yeah, every like if you think, and I've made this video before on TikTok, if you think that Anakin's prophecy was to eliminate the Sith for all eternity, then you're left with a circular argument as to what if any villain rose to power that would immediately erase Anakin, and now you're kind of stuck in a box. What the hell do you write the sequels about? Who is the villain? Because if you want to, unless you just want to make episode 7, 8, and 9 about smugglers and non-force users, that's never going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And for anyone that it does bug, like, we still have so much Legends material. I've read hundreds of books and I haven't read them all. It's crazy.
I can't even claim that, man. You've probably read a lot more than I have.
Last time I did my count, it's I guess I shouldn't say hundreds. I've read about 120 Legends books and all of the canon novels. But I haven't read every single comic, and also there's a lot of the, like, young people's stuff, the junior novels, the Forces of Destiny stuff, where it's not my cup of tea. It's not for me, right? I mean, I'm not gonna crap on it. I'm not the target demographic, so that's okay.
Yeah, it's definitely the same for me. I mean, I haven't read every single comic, every book, and the secret to the videos and the questions that I choose to do is they're only material that I know, right? So everyone thinks I know everything about Star Wars, but I don't make a video if I don't know it. Like, everyone keeps asking me to write about or do a video about Nihilus and stuff. It's like I've only read a little bit about him. I'm not really, that familiar with him. And so yeah, just a little trade secret like that.
Also, no one has asked or said anything about the Star Wars show Resistance, which I have
Yes.
seen, and the second season was actually pretty good. But
It's a good show. Like it's definitely a slow burn. Episode 6, season 1 is when things start to kick up dust and be a good show. And
I think
did
I'm
they
gonna
did they
start.
cancel it?
I would be surprised if they hadn't, but I don't know for sure.
All I know is the sequels need their Clone Wars.
1,000%. We need content leading up to and beyond it. Leia Bloodlines as a book was amazing, and I know Claudia Gray is just awesome in general, but I want to see some. I want to see some stuff from that era. I mean, so in Bloodlines, that's when everyone finds out that Vader is Leia's dad. She hadn't even told Ben. Yeah. When did Ben find out? Can I see that? I need to see that. You know what I mean?
There's a lot missing. It's like, especially in Rise of Kylo Ren, there's still a lot missing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what about before then? What about, from the time he's born, from the time he's given to Luke, and from the time Luke, basically since birth to when he was 19, just give us that story.
Yeah.
But like, the argument that you get from detractors on your comment section is that you shouldn't need alternate media.
We've always needed alternate media.
Exactly. I mean, everyone forgets all of the original trilogies had junior novels and had novelizations.
That came out before the movies back then. And like Palpatine, we didn't have the name Palpatine. Mm-hmm. Palpatine was never said in any of the, right? That came out in the novelization, and Sheev didn't have a first name until 2015. So.
I think for the longest time he was just Emperor.
Yeah,
and that's the case throughout history. Like every single.
That's what I love. They leave these questions,
Yeah, I mean, you can't fit everything into a movie, right? Like you did a video on this, and it was one of my favorite videos of yours. Is showing inner dialogues. Like, we're not going to watch a movie where some guy is just looking off into the distance, and you hear inner monologue. And that stuff is interesting about the novels, and that's why I implore everyone to start reading the novels. Like, knowing what Palpatine is thinking when he meets Rey for the first time, going back to the rule of two, and going back to how Darth Plagueis had always been trying to create a dyad. Like, get over your hate for the sequels. This is some rich lore over here.
It's deep, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are starting to get towards the end of the time, but so if there's anything that you can pull from, actually there'll be two questions. All right, you can pull any story from Legends and canonize it. That's the first question. Second question is you can pull any character, right? They don't have to be from the same. I have a feeling I know the character, but go ahead.
You do. I'm gonna give you the count of 3 to just say it for me.
It's Shatil.
Yes.
She's pretty dope.
Yes. Like, if you haven't played Sator, or if you haven't read the Old Republic books,
read all of them, completed all the storylines.
Do it. Yeah, I mean, she's such an. I love her character so much because she kind of represents a Luke Skywalker of the Old Republic, even before his legend was even a legend. And the way that she inspired those around her with just her voice makes me want to see that on the big screen.
Specifically, Fatal Alliance, was it? Yeah.
I just want to see. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking right now. I just want to see the Galactic Cold War.
Yeah.
With her, Darth Malgus, and But it's going to be tough because the next trilogy is High Republic, and I'm wondering whether or not. Well, to answer your question first, Satil Shan, and then her story from the Cold War and her story discovering Tython, because that's just an amazing arc in terms of Jedi lore and history. But I'm wondering if, like, because it's Legends and it's not canon, if they have an opportunity to adapt it. Like I've been saying in all of my videos, High Republic, there's nothing about it.
Yeah.
We don't know about it,
fresh,
right? And,
fresh, clean slate.
yeah, and so being new canon, they have an opportunity to canonize and adapt a lot of Old Republic stuff to be in the High Republic era. While it may not be the same if you do a 1-to-1 adaptation, because 5,000 years to 200 is kind of like. So, I mean, if they never come out with an Old Republic trilogy, then I would want some version of the Shan family, Revan, Bastilla, Tasil, and Satil, to be adapted into the High Republic era.
But we don't need Theron, right?
Oh man, Theron. I feel so sorry for him. So you know what's interesting? Spoiler alert for my eventual Jedi OC reveal. Actually, through Theron. So, like, you know, you just did a video on this, right? About inheritance or hereditary. So yeah, I mean, in my AU, Theron doesn't have it, but he's got a family tree that eventually leads to my OC. So
okay,
that's headcanon right there.
I like it. Myself, story-wise, absolutely the Darth Bane trilogy.
Yeah,
like seeing someone that doesn't believe in the Force. He doesn't believe in it at all. It's actually helped him throughout his entire life. He just doesn't know it. He just thought, you know, oh, every now and then I just know what's going to happen. We're like, come on, man. You didn't think something was up? But that book, those books give us such a deep understanding of the Force in general. And it's the only thing that ever gives us, you know, a true window into the dark side. I mean, there's that and Darth Plagueis. Love both of them, man. Love James Luceno, but Drew Carpathian with this, just the world that he built and the explanations and how deep it goes is just crazy. And how in the book, yes, he was a person that put the rule of 2 in effect, but it was actually from him reading from Revan earlier that actually came from. And I think that some of that might get canonized. I mean, we found out about Undeadu, right? Undeadu is now canon. And
so many Sith Lords in that visual dictionary. It's crazy.
So
but
yeah,
I'm in complete agreement with you. I think that story needs to be canonized. Or not canonized, he's already canon in name, but that story needs to be adapted.
And I have a hot take.
We have so much history and lore on the Jedi that, like, you kind of need more than just the dark side leads to abilities. Maybe consider.
Yeah, how, you know? But you finding out, like, oh no, it's concentrating on your hatred that the Force lightning ability comes from, and stuff like that. That's really cool to me.
Ooh, I want to amend my answer too. I want to see Satil Shan and the Cold War, but I also want to see the Eternal Empire, because that'll just be the pinnacle of, like,
of not Sith, but kind of.
Yeah, just the beginning of it all. I mean, they'll have complete freedom with that.
That's true.
Officiate. That would be. I mean, they already did a lot of it cinematically with Sator, so all they got to do is just do it live action.
Yeah, and people love it. It's already there. Now, my hot take is a character I would love to see become canonized is Jedi Master. Oh my goodness! Now her name is escaping me. Man, so now I'm upset.
Guys,
But
this stuff isn't always in our head. We gotta look it up sometimes,
but the basilisk Jedi master. So she's a woman. She's like a reptile. She fights with her tail. This is in Legends. She's on the Jedi Council, and if her name comes to me, then I will
use the Force.
I'll do it. Other than that, I also am a huge fan of Jaina Solo. Obviously, she can't truly exist, but for her, how she was always getting beat by Darth Caedus, her brother, and then she goes to Mandalore and trains with the Mandalorians in order to learn how to not fight like a Jedi, and gains a whole bunch of additional skills, and has to realize, oh, I've been using a sword that cuts through everything with no effort. These people have different ways of using swords that I've never even considered, because they've had to consider that type of thing. There's a sharp side, a flat side, depends on the sword and how you want to cut it. There's so much cool stuff there. So I'll change my answer to that only because I can't remember the other one.
Well, since we have Jason Syndulla, it's perfectly possible that they could canonize Jaina in a way that brings her to light. I mean,
forgot about that. Sorry, now I'm just spinning.
And it also makes me, you bring out a good point about the flat side and the dull side, or the blunt side. Does that apply to the Darksaber because it has a sharp side and has a blunt side?
Or is it just a real thick cut?
Yeah.
If you hit someone with the flat side.
Is it just a very biased crystal creating a blunt side?
The Darksaber is problematic to me, but
we haven't seen it used in such a way where it was double, like it was used kind of like a single-edged lightsaber.
Yeah,
kind of interesting.
But yeah, I mean that is.
Give us a live action Jaina Shatterpoint fight with Caedus.
Yeah, absolutely. 1,000. I will start a Kickstarter, like if we need to.
Yes, I'll be the first to put in money.
But yeah, I mean, thank you again for joining me for this discussion. I'm hoping to. My goal is to actually just have a weekly podcast, and then open it up for people to join me and stuff. And I'd love to talk to you again on different things. It's been a blast. Where can people find you?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I've been wanting to collaborate with you ever since I saw your videos on my For You page. So, like, just anybody who is in the business of furthering Star Wars knowledge, and not in the way where Rey isn't a Skywalker, but furthering canon, furthering legends, and kind of keeping them in their camps. So I'm a big fan of yours in that respect. So thanks for having me. You can find me on TikTok at _element7_. You can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/the elements. But you could just go to my link tree in my bio, and everything is there, because the elements is spelled a little wacky.
I'm also going to include it in the description for this video as well. So
thank you. But I think that's pretty much where, I mean, I don't deal with Instagram, and I have Twitter at element7x spelled out. And you should follow me on there, not because I want followers, but that's where I post updates for Echoes of the Past, the audio drama that I'm writing. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, and may the Force be with you always.
May the Force be with you.